topic is At the Mine Gate, the discussion with mining affected communities. And our theme is Not Yet Uhuru, reflection on 65 years of the Freedom Charter and 4 years of the People's Mining Charter. So basically what happened is on the 27th June 2016, which was also the 61st anniversary of the Freedom Charter, I think, representative of mining affected communities, I would like to believe there was around 7 provinces, Makua and Wamua, together with Action Aid South Africa. They were in Joburg to sign and adopt the first ever People's Mining Charter. So basically today marks the 4th anniversary of the People's Mining Charter. So, but then to this date also marks the 65th anniversary of the adoption of the Freedom Charter, which was adopted at the Congress of the People, which was actually the culminating moment of a long process of consultation over the type of South Africa people want to see after the ending of apartheid. So we were supposed to have Mr. Mbangula, our national coordinator, as one of the panelists, but unfortunately, because he's not feeling well, he won't be joining us, but then Comrade Francina will be taking his place. He was to do a brief introduction and welcoming note and give us a brief history about the People's Mining Charter and interrelevance for us as communities affected by mining community. We will also be joined by Ronnie Casras later on. So now I'm having Asanda Pena, who's the senior lecturer at University of Cape Town, if I'm not mistaken. One of the current research looks at the construction of gendered subjectives of women mine workers in platinum mine in Northwest, which is in the Northwest province. So she'll be reflecting on the Freedom Charter broadly and the People's Mining Charter, more especially in terms of the struggle faced by mining affected communities and society in general from a feminist perspective. Asanda Benya, let me welcome you to our event today.
Thank you, comrade. And thank you to Chris and all those who invited me.
Wow, Ronnie Castles has just joined us.
Yes, sorry to be a bit late. Sorry, a bit late. Okay.
Okay, that's right. Comrades and attendees, Ronnie Castles is an ANC and South African Communist Party veteran and our ex-Minister of Intelligence. So basically, he was a member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress around 1987 to 2007. So he'll be reflecting on the historical experiences of the Freedom Charter and the political role the Freedom Charter played during the liberation struggle, and possibly reflect on the relevance of the Freedom Charter today. Thanks, Ronnie Castras, for joining us. You are welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be with you. 65 years anniversary. It's a great day. And up here in Johannesburg, Gauteng, beautiful sunny day indeed.
Thank you. So we will also be joined by Millicent Shungube, who's maybe trying to connect to be joining us a little bit later. So we'll be joined by Youth Tukelo Mahlakwan from Sekhukhune, who's a coordinator for Wamua in Sekhukhune and also the leader in the youth affected by mining affected communities, Yamua in Sekhukhune. She'll also be giving us the reflection on the effect of the negative impact of mining on women, especially youth in the country. Comrade Tukelo, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Comrade Gilbert.
Comrade, my name is Gilbert Muela. I'll be your host for today. So without wasting any time, let me take this opportunity to give this mic to Francina Nkosi, who will be taking us through the People's Mining Charter and give us some welcome address. Comrade Francina, let's hear from you, my sister. Comrade Francina, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Francina Nkosi. I'm Wamua activist in Lephalale. Welcome everyone to the meeting. It's all about the People's Mining Charter. People Mining Charter, it was adopted on the 26th of June at a place called Stay City. We were lucky to have people like Zweli Zimbabwe and Matunjwa to be part of adopting the People Mining Charter. And the objectives of the People Mining Charter is to develop the active agency of communities affected by mining to become socials of their rights. As you know, people who are living in the mining affected communities, they are not recognized, and then everything that is being done, it's not as it is. As you know, our Freedom Charter says the people shall govern, but it's not done like that. Then that's where we've seen that let's have the People Mining Charter where it recognizes the community, because people are being denied basic human rights, access of water, food, shelters, and also not living in a healthy environment. People Mining Charter today, it's 4 years, it's been there. And for us, we are happy on that one because it talks about us, communities. It doesn't talk about other people. We say the people shall govern, then our People Mining Charter saying, yes, the people shall govern. This is why we say the people shall govern. And we like to say and also inform the communities that we want to take this to be our charter for to be recognized and to be regulated, so that it can be seen and it can be used for communities to be developed, because most of the communities who are in the mining communities, they are not developed and they are not getting access of anything. And then we saying nothing about us without us as Makua Wamua. Amanda, and let's have a robust engagement. Thank you.
Comrade Gilbert, you on mute. We can't hear you. So, okay, sorry, comrades. I was saying, thanks, Comrade Francina, for the well presentation and for introducing us to the topic today. So now I would like to take this opportunity to give the chance to Ronnie Casseros, who was a member of the National Executive Committee of African National Congress, and as well as a member of the Central Committee of the South African Communist Party. So to give us a reflection on the historical experiences of the Freedom Charter and the political role the Freedom Charter played during the liberation struggle, and possibly reflect on the relevance of the Freedom Charter today. Comrade Ronnie, can you help us here?
Siyabonga kakhulu, kunjani namhlanje, dumelang everybody. It's great to be with you all. And Comrade Chair there has put 3 points for me to cover, looking back at the way the Charter came into being and then the historic aspects, etc. Coming to the third point, the Charter today, I'll get to that. Obviously, I'll go in sequence, but I want to immediately say that Comrade Francina, in her lovely introduction, realistic, to the point of the practical needs of the people today, that I absolutely go along with that. And I'll come to that in due course. But let me go back then to the very beginning. I'm sure that all of us on this panel are aware of the background history, but I can't avoid having to deal with that given the mandate that I've been provided with, and that perhaps all of those compatriots who have tuned into this webinar might not be aware of. I'm not going to, and don't have the time for a full history lesson, but history is very important to know where we've come from. And in that respect, let's remind ourselves of what South Africa was like 65 years ago, a police state, the people without any rights whatsoever, especially the indigenous Black Africans of our country, and one can't claim for much more than that for the other minority groups of color, those of Asian and mixed race background. The whites were the overlords. This was a white supremacy country. Only the whites had the privileges. The laws were in their favor. The force of the state and the police and the military was in their favor, protecting the relations of power of that time. And of course, as we know, there was no universal franchise. You could only vote if you were a white citizen of the country. So in the struggle of liberation, the point was reached in the middle of the 1950s, where it was decided by what was called a Congress Alliance. Those who later broke away and formed the Pan-Africanist Congress, the great Robert Sobukwe and so on, were still within the ANC fold at that point. And the idea of the Freedom Charter goes back a year earlier to 1954, when Z.K. Matthews, Professor Z.K. Matthews, who was one of the key figures of the ANC, came up with the idea that the people of our country required their own manifesto to counter that of the white state and the racist constitution, and believing in the need to go to the grassroots. A call went out for contributions throughout the country to be collected over the year towards the formula of a Freedom Charter which was to come. And the reading of how those recommendations and resolutions came about makes very interesting reading. I was not privy to that. At that stage, I was in high school, very sensitively affected, I must say, by what most whites just disregarded, because you could see the cruelty and the suffering of your Bantu in the very streets of the city you lived in, the cinema you went to, the horrible apartheid and the dreadful cruelty. So I was sensitive to it, but it was only a couple of years later that I became aware that the charter had been formulated 65 years ago. And reading the history, talking to people of those times, it was a very obviously exciting experience. People went around the country, all over, to all groups. They focused on people who were the sufferers in our country, those with uprights in the main, but they tried to get through to everybody. And they had to do this under police surveillance, under police laws, to get into the farmlands and to try and get the views of the farm laborers was an incredibly dangerous thing, as it was to get into the mine compounds, the mine hostels, to collect the aspirations of the people. The group that was entrusted to draw together what were thousands, sometimes of well typed out submissions, sometimes just on the back of postcards, scrawled on in pencil on scraps of paper, amounted to tens of thousands of inputs from the grassroots. And it required a huge degree of skill. It was given to Benny Turok, sorry, I'm making an error, to Rusty Bernstein, who had all of these paper submissions and had a group working with him towards the 25th, 26th of June, when the delegates to the Congress of the People came from all over South Africa, 3,300 arriving. Unlike today on the Highveld, a sunny day, it was actually pouring with rain at times, and the police cordons were everywhere on the highways, forcing buses loaded with African people to stop, and they sent them back from where they came. So many more would have arrived. When they assembled at Kliptown, today a historic site called Freedom Square, they were surrounded by the police. They literally discussed the submissions, and they did so clause by clause, the 10 clauses that make up the Freedom Charter, under the gun and the eyes of a police state. And at the beginning, as they were proceeding to adopt the charter on the 26th of June, that 65 years ago to this day, the police closed in on them and were preparing to question everybody there, to take everybody's names, to make sure no people who had been banned already and restricted in movement or attending meetings were present. People like Walter Sisulu and others who were banned watched the proceedings from nearby buildings that overlooked the square, and they write very interestingly about what they saw. So there's a lot that's been written. And then at the end, the police closed the rally down, and the platform called out to the masses there, do we adopt the charter? And it was adopted by application unanimously under the rifle and in those dire conditions. So let me just remind ourselves that this was written with the literally blood and sweat of our people, from the grassroots, coming up, obviously then formulated into an accessible manner so that people could really readily understand, remember it, and it became a magnificent part of the inspiration and the objectives of the freedom struggle. It is the bedrock of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights today. One can go on talking about the many years during the struggle period when it did serve to inspire us in the national liberation struggle within Umkhonto weSizwe, as it was studied as the lodestar for our freedom struggle. We do know that the Pan-African Congress a few years later, by 1959, actually broke with the Congress movement and called them the Charterists and did not agree with the Charter. And they particularly took issue with the opening preamble that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. To this day, to some perhaps, it is a contentious issue that we can leave to further discussion today, but whether I was a member of the ANC or not, it wasn't contentious in the majoritarian sense when we went to the elections of 1994 and when we adopted the Constitution. I want to come to the last point, Comrade Chair. If you allow me, you can come back and ask further questions if there's time about how it imbued our spirit and resolve to struggle, and how we managed, and when the public organizations like the United Democratic Front and COSATU came into being, how they adopted the Freedom Charter in the 1980s, that needs to be recalled. So it did inspire those of us in the underground, in FA, in exile, in the prisons, in the emergent organizations. But let me come to the rub now of the situation today. I think that and we can follow Comrade Francino, because let's bear in mind this, that the Freedom Charter or any document of that kind in history, Magna Charta in Britain, the rights of humanity, the African rights, the Atlantic rights of 1943 during the war, they're written in very broad brushstrokes. In terms, and you take it in our terms, in the case of the struggle itself, and then its adoption, Bill of Rights and Constitution, there then is a big gap between the written aspect, the guiding aspects of Constitution, of Freedom Charter, and its application in real life, in real time, in the context of today, in the practicalities of on the ground. And it doesn't mean, I would argue, that because that hasn't been achieved in the nth degree, it doesn't mean the Freedom Charter needs to be rejected. It's there to guide us, and it's up to us to deepen and develop our democracy. And it's governments who we elect who are meant to implement the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, etc. And they can be fast, they can be slow, they can be remiss. There are controversial issues 25 years into our freedom and democracy relating to clauses within this Act. The keynote aspects which relate to mining, which relate to the land, which relate to nationalization of the banks and so on, which relate to areas such as human rights, such as our schools, such as housing, such as access to water. And what needs to be done is, as Francina has pointed out, as the Mining Charter states, that we have to narrow that gap. We've got to bridge from the broad brushstrokes to how we live today. And I am with comrades at the grassroots level. I think that there's too much of a gap. We can see that from 1990, 94 to today, the wealth gap between the super rich and the destitute of our country has widened more and more. We've seen other aspects which we can't accept, where we have to pressurize government, where we have to make the demands, as in the Mining Charter, where we have to question aspects. Why is it that we turned our back on nationalization of key industries, of mines, and so on? Why is it that the land issue has been left in a very barren way? I'm talking metaphorically, barren in two senses, of people growing food, so there's food security, but also, as the Charter says, those who work the land shall own the land, and so on. So yes, I stand full score with everybody who makes the claims for the needs that we are still fighting for to this day. But I end, Comrade Chair, and comrades with us and those listening, don't throw out the baby with the bath water. In this sense, it's a big baby, it's a mother, it's a grandmother, it's a Freedom Charter, which stands as a parent, can only stand to the children, where a parent is saying, here are the guiding values of life and what you should aim for and what is yours by right. And now it's for you, my child, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, to make sure that you fight for that reality. So in saying that we are the children and the offspring, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying we're immature. I'm talking in the historical sense. And I'm just making that plea to cherish what those who came before us fought for and advocated. And we came to that point in 94 where we toppled apartheid, but we still have so much more to go. We mustn't go backward. We see this has been happening, unfortunately. I was a water at one stage, and without claiming that we made no errors, we came in with basic free water for the people. And we said that would be a ladder. It wouldn't just be the particular amount of water for free that I made and put into a legislation or regulation, but that would be a start. And we took as the yardstick the United Nations human rights view on minimum water. I said it was a step on a ladder, and we must ascend that ladder to the point where everybody has proper flush toilets in their homes, hot and cold running water, bath and shower. We can't have what we started with then, communal taps in the villages. It was a beginning, and we needed to develop that further. To my horror, my absolute horror, I see so many municipalities have reneged on the free basic water, that minimum amount. It's intolerable, and this is where we must stand to demand from our government not to go back, go forward. And we know, comrades, very well, governments, no matter what they say in rhetoric, they only really take the action needed when there is mass pressure, grassroots pressure. Siyabonga kakhulu.
Thanks, Ronnie. Billy, with that mouthful presentation, some of our panelists and the attendees will definitely have questions for you later. So now I'd like to take this opportunity to let Asanda to give us the background and reflect on the Freedom Charter broadly and the People's Mining Charter. Comrade Asanda, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thank you so much, Conrad. Unfortunately, people won't get a video from me, partly because of low bandwidth. Part of the reason in higher education we've been saying online learning is not going to work. No one can teach online, and students can't learn online, at least not the critical things that we want students to learn. So I apologize that I won't have a video. It's because of these connectivity issues, even in Cape Town, in cities. Thank you so much to you, Comrade, for leading the discussion, to Comrade Ronnie for the broad outline, and also to Chris, who invited me to this very interesting celebration of the two charters. Obviously, I'm not going to do justice to any of the things that you have said I should talk to, but I'll try and talk a little bit to some of the core People's Charter, and a mandla to the People's Charter. 5 years is a long time. I want to talk to two of the core principles, the third principle and the ninth principle. And for the benefit of people who do not know what the third principle is about, it is about the benefits from mining activities, benefits such as profits, employment, procurement, and local economic development, that they should be shared equitably distributed to directly affected communities, near mining communities, workers, and the public through a democratic process. And the ninth principle is on women, focuses on women who must have the right to inherit the land and should be consulted on all issues affecting their bodies, their families, their land, and lives in both customary traditional structures and community, local, provincial, and national structures. So those are the two principles of the People's Charter that I will be talking to. If you cannot hear me, Comrade, feel free to unmute yourself and just flag that I can be heard, because I'm not sure if people can hear me.
Then what we can
But I
hear
think,
clearly.
perfect. So I think these two principles that I'm going to talk to, it's because my research is mainly on, it's a little bit on mining communities. It focuses specifically on mine workers. But I think there's connections between the two, because workers are community members, but also community members are workers, even though they are not recognized as workers. There's a lot that community members do to directly benefit mining companies that they are not recognized for, because of the way in which we understand who is a worker and who's not a worker. So while I'm focusing on the employment part or the workers part, I see connections, direct connections. I think the lack of appreciation of connections is another way in which capitalism tries to make us blind to the realities of how it exploits and alienates us from all of these things. So as I said, I'll focus on these two principles, employment, but I think I want to also just say that this is against a particular background where mining communities, if you check statistics South Africa, where mining communities, like the rest of the country, but particularly mining communities in rural areas, or in the former Bantustans, where they have, so this is the background, where they have very high unemployment rates, especially women. The unemployment rate in some of the communities and some of the villages is as high as 80 to 90%. People are relying, even though they have this mineral wealth that the charter says will be shared amongst all people, that the People's Charter specifically says should benefit all people, that people unemployment rate in these communities is so incredibly high that without government grants, some of these communities would be absolutely falling apart. So that's to say the background is that of communities that continue not to benefit even in the post-apartheid or in the democratic dispensation. But I want to go back a little bit to 1961, a few years after the charter was adopted. By the way, I think Comrade Ronnie has alluded to some of the critiques of the Freedom Charter, and I think I hold some of them. I think while it was radical in its time, there's a need to think through some of its limitations currently, the Freedom Charter, or some of the things that it does not enable, because it speaks directly to the Constitution. As you are saying, it's the ancestor of the Constitution. I think there are certain things that it does not enable people, and the people that I'm talking about today in particular, there are certain claims that it does not allow us to make, even though it's got all these grand ideas. I think if you look at the Constitution and if you think back to the hearings around the land question in the country, there's certain things that people could not lay claim to precisely because of the way in which the Constitution is framed. So I think we need to have a much more critical stance, and I'm not saying throw it out, whether with the baby or not. I'm not saying throw it out at all, the Freedom Charter, but I'm saying we need to be much more critical about it and appreciate that it was radical in its time, but not so much now because of all of these limitations that it has. But I wanted to go back to 1961, 6 years after it was adopted. And in 1961, in May 1961, workers were organizing a stay away. And there was a comrade, her name was Elizabeth Mafeking. Comrade Mafeking, she was called Lizzie by some, or Rocky by others. Comrade Mafeking was the president of the South African Food and Canning Workers Union, and later she was the secretary of the African Food and Canning Workers Union. And this is what she said before she was smuggled into Lesotho when she had been given a banishing orders. She said, and she encouraged workers who were preparing for the stay away in May 1961. She reminded them of three things, borrowing from the Freedom Charter, and I think it speaks very much to the People's Charter. She said the first thing that she reminded them of, she said that the people have been robbed of their birthright to land by a government founded on injustice, and inequality. The second thing that she reminded people of was that there was a great need for the restoration of the wealth, of the national wealth to the people. And the third thing, and I think it's what I also want to focus on, and it's what Comrade Ronnie was talking about, the third thing that she reminded people to encourage them to participate in this stay away in 1961 was that the power is in your hands. I want to go back to, there's a comrade, if she can unmute herself. I think she's on the phone. It's kind of disturbing because I've got headphones on. But the first thing that she reminded the people of, as I said, was that the people have been robbed of their birthright. I wanna add to that and say that that robbery continues under this so-called democratic government. And that the injustices that the comrade was talking about in 1961 that were perpetuated by a government that was founded on inequality and injustice, that today they are perpetuated, that injustice, that robbery, are perpetuated by the government that we've elected. and it's cemented in so many ways in the day-to-day lives of people. I mean, when we think about the lockdown, you asked Tom right at the beginning, how have we found the lockdown? And I think what has been in the national news, or talking to people, organizing with people, what is very clear is that there is a continuation of an injustice in this country by the government that we have elected. So I'm just adding, I'm making the connections between the history of 1961, when Comrade Rocky was encouraging workers on a stay away, but also to our realities to today, that there are lots of continuations in South Africa, even though we want to read our history in ways that see apartheid and post-apartheid and see discontinuities. I want to emphasize the continuities in today. And the second one that she talked to, as I've already said, was this great need to restore the national wealth to the people. And I want to emphasize to Black people in particular. The restoration of national wealth, white people have always had it, so we're not talking about them. I want to emphasize Black people, to Black people, and to Black women in particular, who are on the fringes of so many things that are happening in this country, including in mining communities. So fringes of economic life, fringes of social life. I mean, the deaths, the murder of women that we have seen in the past few weeks of lockdown is astounding. It is shocking. And it's not a break from the past. Again, it's a continuation, this gender-based violence. But also I want to emphasize that, you know, that this restoration of the national wealth, that we've been on the fringes also of political life in this country. So when we're talking about the restoration of national wealth, we need to appreciate people who have really been excluded from it, from the land, from real rights, recognizing real rights. The third thing that Comrade Liz Rocky talked about was this power is in your hands. And I want to add the power to agitate, the power to continue making demands, because with more rights that we're winning, there's also the backlash that we are seeing. And I think the reason we have the People's Charter is because of the backlash that we are seeing, that we have been seeing. We won rights soon after 1994, but there's been a lot of rollback, whether we're talking about communities, whether we're talking about mining communities specifically, or we're talking about workers. So there's the power to agitate, and is something that I want to emphasize, because just like during apartheid, where capital was in bed with the state, it continues in post-apartheid. And I think for me, then this brings about the realization that for us to make claims to this power, or there's really a great need to organize and mobilize ourselves and exclude or leave behind no one. Because again, if there's these exclusionary ways in which we've been organizing historically, and I'll talk a little bit to that, the power that the state and capital has is so much that it necessitates this linking of these struggles, whether workplace struggles of mine workers with community. And I think in Marikana, we began to see that in 2012. And to some extent, that continues to happen in Marikana, where some of the trade unions, well, particularly AMCU, continues to have some influence in what's happening in communities, and community members the other way also. So there's this need then. But sadly, I think what we've also been seeing is that, so I want to move now, and this is what I want to focus on. I want to move to the workplace. So while there's a great need for us to make connections between these struggles, because those who are against us have so much power, what we've been seeing is really the sidelining of some people who are so central in the struggles that we are fighting. And I'm talking here about the sidelining or the marginalization of women within the mining industry. Not just the marginalization of women, but the marginalization of some of their struggles. So while workers broadly are marginalized, there's a further marginalization of women within all of these struggles, and their issues being treated or seen as side issues. In South Africa, for instance, there are over or about 500,000 mine workers. Some of these workers are working permanently, and others are subcontracted, coming from mining communities, mining affected communities. And of these 500,000 workers, only 11% of them are women. And these women are working in very marginal occupations, earning very little money compared to men. But that's not the only issue. The issue is that these low numbers of women are directly related to what the mining charter suggests, that the mining charter sets the bar so low, the initial mining charter in particular, and I think the current iteration of the mining charter, where some of these things that we once regarded as victories, that there's been a complete rollback. So when there's a rollback on things that are already so low, it means we are in a real crisis. The mining charter, especially the very first one, said that there has to be about 10% women in mining within 5 years. And then there was a revision of that mining charter and so forth. But this 10% has been seen as a ceiling by some, instead of being seen as a floor by some mining houses. But this 10%, it speaks directly for me to the two principles that I said I would focus on. That if we are saying only 10% of women in mining, how can we make claims to what the mining charter, or what the People's Charter rather, is saying, is demanding that mining activities should benefit all, that women must be consulted, but also women need to feature in all of these things? How is that going to be possible if the mining charter contradicts or does not even really appreciate the demands that are put before it by the People's Charter? If the mining charter sets the bar so low, but also if the mining charter, because it's effectively excluding women in these mining affected communities, such as Rustenburg, where I do most of my research, but also in other communities. And like I said, this is like mining houses, they treat this as a ceiling, and it's reinforced the tokenistic way of thinking about the inclusion of women in mining generally. I'm not even talking about women in employment. But this is not just about, it's not just mining houses that have done this, but also trade unions that have. And I think I don't want to go into details, but trade unions also that actually do not appreciate that for us to recognize or to realize some of these demands that we have around exclusion of people, around exploitation, demanding that no exclusion of people, that for us to make claims to those demands, we really need to question some of these things that are in the mining charter and to push for those that are in the People's Charter. I'm not sure if comrades are following me. So the demand, therefore, in addition to the rights of mining communities for me to have a say on what happens to their land, we also need to be demanding a greater representation of women. It can't just be 10%, and we can't just be satisfied with this 10%. That is really a ceiling, but has been treated as that is really a floor, but has been treated as a ceiling by mining companies. And in conclusion then, it's to say for me that the restoration of the national wealth, mineral wealth to the people, we need to recognize that women are central or pivotal part of the people whose rights need to be, or where this restoration is to happen. That the fight for justice, the fight for all of these principles that are in the People's Charter needs to recognize it's not just a fight for justice broadly, it's also a fight for gender issues within these mining communities, within these mining workplaces. And there's a need not just to fight for exploitation, but to fight patriarchy also within our own structures that are fighting for these rights, for these recognitions, and for these, a lot of things that are outlined in the People's Charter. And just to close off then is just to say also that, you know, there's mine workers, there's mining affected communities. There's also equally important labor sending communities that need to be centralized in all of these struggles, and women in those labor sending areas. What I'm suggesting then is that in our organizing, in our mobilizing, in our strategies, we need to bring women on board and not just see them as appendages. That the rights of women, the rights of communities, rights of workers are under attack. And it's very important that, especially in the current iteration, I mean, I'm sure people at Wamua and Makua know the current iteration of the Charter, that it's really rolling back on some of these rights. And it's very important that in our fights, we bring them back to the center, we bring them back to the core. And I think I'll leave it at there, Comrade. Thank you.
Thanks, Comrade Asanda, for a well-articulated presentation. I think you have set the precedent for our upcoming panelists, Tukelo Mahlakwani and Millicent Shugube. Welcome, Millicent.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Okay. Okay, now I would like to take this opportunity and allow Tukelo Mahlakwani to give us a brief presentation on what the negative impact of mining on women, especially youth, is. Tukelo Mahlakwani, can you come in, please?
Hi, everyone. Firstly, I would like to greet all panelists and listeners, and not forgetting to thank the opportunity. Yeah, I'm just an activist from Limpopo province in Sekhukhune. And as Comrade Gilbert already mentioned, that I'm a coordinator of WAMUA and part of parcel of YAMUA. The past 1 year, we conduct a social audit, we as affected communities. And the thing that we found out, I'll be focusing on gendered impact of mining. As Asanda mentioned, that women are not consulted, and it's what we found out, that women and youth next to mine are not consulted when coming to negotiation of access to land and compensation or benefit sharing agreement on this, on benefit and sharing agreement. And this, we found out that is disempower and disadvantage women and youth, and it may also undermine traditional decision-making structure. And the other thing, we found out that when coming to payments or compensation or benefit sharing agreement, companies goes to men as the head of the household and denied women or youth to access to control over financial benefit of mine. And it really disempower us as women or as youth. And again, we found out that the companies or the mines are damage our land and pollute our water. And we as women's capacity, we can't provide food and clean water to our family. And the other thing that companies or mine sectors do is that men are the one who employed in the mine, and they withdraw their labor from traditional substances activities, and which result the increased work banded for us as women or for us as youth to become economically dependent on men and income derived from formal employed. And it can also result in a traditional role as youth or women. And the other thing is that these mines or extractive industry projects sometimes trigger the influx of men workforce, and this lead increase of alcohol use and traffic of women for sexual exploitation, sexual transmitted disease, HIV and AIDS, and not forget violence against women, which can make women feel and be less safe in their home and communities. And the pollution from extractive project and stress from relocation can lead a chronic illness among family members, particularly children and elders. They increase their care needs and women unpaid care work. So we as youth or women affected by mines, we want to ensure that the activities that is happening around mines or any company respect the rights of women and respect the rights of youth particularly, and promote youth and women empowerment and participate in community decision making. It's what we want to promote as youth. And again, we want to identify and mitigate potential impact and increase the benefit of mining projects. And all this, we can win it, or we can win only if the company can have a framework on gender impact assessment. On one, if they can conduct or collect the baseline information about the community impact by the extractive industry project. And then the second thing is to discuss or analyze the information collected with the women and other members of the community, and plan to agree to action to avoid the risk and have a positive impact. The last but not the least, if the company or the mines can review and undertake ongoing consultation with women and other community members, I think we can win the battle. Even we as women, we can stand up and fight for what is ours. Thanks, Comrade Gilbert.
Thanks, Comrade Gale, for well-articulated presentation from youth and women's perspective. So I would like to take this opportunity now and say, Comrade Millicent, the stage is now yours. Can you share your views on the topic at hand, please?
Okay, thanks, Gilbert. I'd like to greet everyone and thanks for the opportunity. As also a woman coming from a mining affected area and also a leader of a women-led organization, I do feel that the aim of the charter was to open opportunities, but that's not true. Because what I can say is that the charter is dividing us and only works for the capitalists and exclude the vulnerable. The charter was supposed to bring change, which is transformation, target, and time frame. But as women coming from the mining area, we are also affected a lot because we are not taken serious in terms of making decisions and getting our voice across. Why am I saying that? It's because women are often tasked with the duties to provide food for their families. Yet here in Mpumalanga, people used to survive by farming on the land. But ever since the land has been taken by mining, food security is now a problem. Women are living in unstable conditions and they are the one that has to bear the challenges. And it's such a shame that women are not heard, because I believe that women can really organize and be heard. Because for example, like with the women that have organized and built movements, playing a leading in liberation struggles. However, they did not receive the same attention and recognition as men. Because, for example, those 20,000 women that marched to the Union building to protest against the past laws, those were women and they were heard, and that law was taken out because the women spoke. And the charter that says that the land shall be shared equally, I don't believe that's true, because with the land that was left for farming, now it's taken for mining, yet people are not benefiting from that. They are not getting what they really deserve, especially the host communities that are the ones that are close to the mines. Like you'll find that the communities are living in poor conditions. Some of the places are not electrified. It has poor sanitation, yet the mine is making billions of rents every day, every month, but they're not looking out for those communities. And also it was said that people have a right to get houses, security, and comfort. There's no security around, because women these days are no longer safe. You are scared for your life. Like there's so much high rate of gender-based violence, and mostly it's caused by the mines, because there are a lot of people coming in to look for jobs, and you find that women are depending on those men that coming from outside, leading to this high rate of gender-based violence. So it's also a big issue on that one. Also, it was said that the minerals shall be shared equally and everyone has a right to those minerals. But who are those people that have rights to minerals, especially when it comes to this small scale miners? Like it was said and declared that everyone has a right to land and has a right to the minerals. But we find out that companies from outside, they are the one that are enjoying the minerals, while we as the rightful owners, we're just getting those breadcrumbs. So I do feel that we are mostly affected and we are taking advantage of. And the only solution is for us to organize and make sure that we are really ahead with all the challenges that we are facing as mining. Because even with us, we also did a social audit, trying to find out exactly how does the mining house works in terms of employment, in terms of giving skills to the community. Yet no one is benefiting from those skills, only a few. And you'll find out that the skills that they will give out, they'll ask that they're gonna train operators, but mostly women, especially the youth, they will choose males over females. So it's not like equal. Then exactly who are entitled to those skills that they have promised? And when it comes to employment, you'll find out that the people that are the host community for that mines are not employed. Instead, it's people from outside. People that are really hosting the mines are the ones that are bearing the real challenges. And with the skills development, you'll find out they will just give them skills of bricklaying, and they will give an excuse that women can go to do bricklaying, plumbing. That's why their preparation is male, which is unfair to the women. Because I believe that a woman can also do what a man can do. They should just stop marginalizing that men are more muscular than females, because they even given them a chance to prove if they can really do the work. So it's really a big issue, because we have a lot of impacts in terms of sanitation, the water. Like we're living in unstable conditions. Every day we're experiencing air pollution, which is something that is caused by the mines. Yet we try to like reach out to them to like, at least if, because you are polluting and already making us sick, why not invest in a proper clinic, or yes, proper medical facilities for the community, which is far-fetched. And especially where I'm from, we are surrounded by like close to 12 mines, and we are within those mines. Yet if you could see the place, the roads are a mess. Like there are places where there's no electricity, like there's no proper sanitation, yet we have mines just like meters away, especially the one that's it was, I think it has 2 years now. It's just 100 meters away from people's houses, and these days, like, they would just blast 2 times a day. Imagine that kind of unstable condition we live in. So it's such a shame, because us as women, we do try to engage with the minds, try to get what's rightfully ours, yet we get the runaround. We are not being heard as much as men are heard, because with other men's organization, they do hear them, and at the end of the day, they become gatekeepers of those minds, and as women, we just take a back seat. So I do feel that this Freedom Charter is not working for everyone. There are people that are benefiting from it, while the people on the ground, the vulnerable communities, are the ones that are suffering. So in closing, what I can say is we need to create women-focused services that will really benefit women. And I do believe that in increasing that, it can also increase economic empowerment. And also we need to challenge the unfair norms. Mining must be gender inclusive. We must stop the patriarchal norms that women can't do what men can do. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me take this opportunity and thank all the panelists. I think now I would like to check with the attendees if there's anyone who would like to raise a question or two to one of our panelists, so we can discuss these issues robustly. I had Ron Castro talks about the relevancy of the Freedom Charter, saying don't throw the child with the bathwater. But my question to you, Ron, is we all know that South Africa is one of the countries it's one of an equal country in the whole world. And yet the Freedom Charter was adopted 65 years back. We have the Constitution, we have 26 years of freedom, of democracy with our current government, but yet people are still living in poverty, still being exploited, still being unpaid. So what does it mean to the Freedom Charter now? Is it really relevant in today's era?
Thank you. Thanks for that question. I'm so pleased you put it to me. I take it you can hear me, Comrade Chair?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I agree so much, and I'm so moved by all the presentations. And it doesn't go over my head, the fact that this comes from wonderful, strong, intelligent women who I sit here and I learn from. As old as I am, I'm 82. By the way, I knew Rocky, Elizabeth Mofokeng. She would be so proud of what she's heard here today. And please don't misunderstand me, comrades. I look at our history, and when I say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in South Africa today stinks. It stinks. And you all have expressed that. I express it all the time. I'm old and I don't get around as much as these women do and as you do, Comrade Chair, but I've got eyes and ears and I'm in touch, and I absolutely am agonized at the conditions that our people live in, and I am affronted by the way women in our country are treated. And I'm not just referring to the fact of the horrible, horrible nightmare of the rapes, etc., that everybody wrings their hands on, and all the white liberals and the press do. But the actual conditions, the mines, the farms, the industries, in the kitchens and everywhere that our women suffer from. It's intolerable. And as Lenin said, that you can only judge a society on the basis of the conditions that the women are living under. The women have to be as equal as everybody else. And absolutely, women can do things as well as men, and in some cases, far better than men. I know I'm talking a lot now. I want to just get back to your point. I can't resist pointing out in the war of aggression by the American imperialists on the Vietnamese people, and we know the Vietnamese people drove the Americans, the United States, out of their country and liberated it. There were areas where women played a better role than those fighting men of the guerrilla struggles, because they could do things better, demining bombs and explosives, in sniping, in accuracy with anti-aircraft guns, and so many other things. We can go through history, our own history about this. I want to agree with Comrade Yolanda, who took up that point about, yes, the Freedom Charter has played its role. It was radical for its time. And now in the way we reflect and what we see in terms of the challenges we face, obviously, we can't just sit on our laurels and say, no, we've got the Freedom Charter. We can't even sit on our laurels and say, look at our wonderful Constitution and Bill of Rights. It's what is there on the ground. And the comrades are absolutely correct. And Rocky, Elizabeth Mafeking, would agree and say, yes, she was talking about the 1961 strike. There's certain principles of struggle and aspiration, which is what the Freedom Charter is all about, by the way. It's about the aspirations. And where she says, we must have the right to agitate, we must stand up, we must protest, we must fight for our goals and our interests, and so on. And that key point about you, Yabantu, the men, the women of our country, are being the working people, the marginalized youth, old people, the women. You've got to fight for the rights of the wealth of this country that are being plundered, and to this day continue. The lion's share continues to go to the capitalist class and to the owners of the means of production. We've got to fight against that. I totally agree. We've got to look at the question of the Workers' Charter, the People's Charter. We've got to advocate for that. We've got to make it as profound and as a concrete force as possible. So, Comrade Chair, you asked me how relevant, and I'm saying to you, it has its place in our history. We don't cast it aside, we build on it. It represented the aspirations of our people in the 40s, in the 50s, and so on. And it doesn't deal in the detail, and it doesn't confront aspects of society today where ostensibly through the right to vote, we can vote in a government. But what about ensuring that that government pays heed to the people, to the working people, to the unemployed, to the marginalized, and not to give in to those who own the means of production, who are making the wealth, who are keeping, in so many cases, they keep the people down, the workers down, and they keep the people down on the role, the position in society of the women of our country. So with my old age and my last breath, I want to be part of this, and I'm imploring you all, myself included, we've got to energize, we've got to get through the phase of the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter sits on the fence, and they did so knowingly because they were organizing a broad united front against white supremacy. So it sits on the fence. It doesn't come out in favor of socialism. But post-universal franchise, Comrade Chair, you get away from just the national liberation. You get into the realm of who owns the means of production, who benefits from the wealth and from labor. And for me, socialism is on the agenda, and everything that the comrades have said here today points to that fact. That is the struggle for us today. And if the government doesn't move in that orientation, it must know that it's up against a huge force, rock force like Rocky Mafeking, from the ground up, and that the women of our country will be not just at the center and the base of that, but to the fore, because the women of this country, Comrade Chair, it's no secret, it's not a mystery. Why is it, I find this all the time, that more and more young women and older women are coming to the fore? Why? Why is that? It's because the women are feeling the yoke of oppression and exploitation and all these evil aspects far more than any of us. And my goodness me, Comrade Chair, the way the men of our country feel that yoke of oppression and exploitation, and the youth and the marginalized, but the women do so even more. That's why, of course, the wonderful young men and people like yourselves to the fore and emerging as leaders, but the women are coming into their own for the reason I've given. Thank you. It's a wonderful pleasure and honor for me to sit here and listen to the voices that I've listened to already.
Thanks, Comrade. I won't make any follow-up question. I would like now to go to Comrade Asanda. And Comrade Asanda, you mentioned something about the mining charter not respecting or recognizing women enough with the percentage that is hoping to achieve when it comes to women labor and inclusion in mining. Are you saying that it's a clear indication that mining or the government still recognize women as still recognizes place for women as in the kitchen, or still recognize men as the head of household even in 2020?
Thanks, Comrade, and thanks to all the other speakers. Very interesting insights from them, and I think they concretized a lot of things around women's experiences and how the ideals that are outlined in the charter, Freedom Charter, are so far removed. Like, we're not even close to recognizing some of these things in our communities. And yet these are communities that if we subscribe to the notion that wealth needs to be dug out, mined, that these are communities that are wealthy, if we subscribe to that version of what wealth means. I don't necessarily, but anyway, so thank you so much to all of them. I don't know if I'm going to answer the question directly, Comrade, but I do think that it's not, I mean, what you're pointing to is not only just something, it's not just something that mines and the government believe, and I think it's actually quite a widespread belief that women belong in the kitchen, this domestic ideals around women. And I think there's so much evidence that points to that, not just in mines, but also when you're thinking about just our country generally, how it's how the country imagines itself, how the country operates, the norms of society, the values of society. I think everything around us reinforces the idea that women belong in particular spaces and some spaces belong to men. It also reinforces the ideas that women are not as strong as men. Of course, we know that none of these things are true. In fact, if you read closely the history of Africa, you see that some of these things were never the case. Women in prehistoric African societies were as involved in productive activities as men. But because there was no divide in terms of industry and the home, or work and home, a lot of these things with the development of capitalism have been so naturalized that we think this is the way things have always been, and we've stopped questioning and critiquing and actually working and pushing against some of these logics. So I think it's beyond mine that these are beliefs, and I think it speaks to just the society broadly. And I think for me, it also actually speaks to the statistics of gender-based violence in this country are out of this world, and it is precisely because of these kinds of beliefs. So we may see these things as just, you know, it's women being marginalized in trade unions, it's women being marginalized in communities or in, but actually it has real effects on their lives. It's got real, excuse me, 2 seconds, stop. it's got real impact on people's lives. It's a matter of life and death for people, and for women in particular. These very small, or what people think of as very small sexist ideals. In fact, they don't even think of them as sexist ideas, but they think of them as we're protecting women. So this protectionist discourse that has been normalized over a very long period of time, that these things actually lead to death of women. They're not far removed from it. There's a direct link. I'm not saying they cause it, but they certainly contribute to some of the ills of our society and the marginalization of women, and including the death of women. So I just wanted to underline that it goes beyond just their inclusion in mining. It's got bigger ramifications. And then I wanted to touch on something that I think it was Comrade Millicent who mentioned it, that this idea that, and it speaks to the question you were asking, Chair, this idea that women aren't as strong as men and cannot work. So my work is exactly on some of those things. And in the work that I do, I break down how mining bodies are constructed, how mining bodies are built up by mining companies closely with communities. And I use the notion or the logic of masculinity to outline how this mining body, which is supposedly has been naturalized as a masculine body, how all of these things are constructions of mining companies. There's nothing about our strength as women that makes it impossible for us to do certain things. So it's just to say again, all of these categories that seek to reinforce differences are products of a system that wants to exploit, are products of a system that wants to exclude, and not necessarily natural things. It's not gravity. It's not like there's nothing we can't do about them. So it's just to amplify the point that the comrade was saying, that of course women can do all of these things. And I think some of the things that they were talking to, I mean, these are things that when we were talking about what contributed to the Marikana massacre, the fact that in a mining community, you do not have a hospital, there's no proper sanitation, there's no proper electrification. In a community that, if we believe that this is wealth that's underground, that has this wealth, you know, that these things, we saw that as the Marikana massacre, but if we appreciate that actually what led or what contributed to the massacre was also because of what was happening in communities, what we should be very scared of is the fact that what we saw in Marikana in 2012 is something that we're going to see in other communities actually around the country, and it's going to be intensified. 34 workers were massacred in 2012. More and more people are going to be massacred in other mining communities if these things are not addressed. And activists are going to be on the front line. Activists are going to be the ones who are going to be the most victimized. So it's to say the issue or the struggle or the crisis before us is so much great that we have no other option but to properly organize ourselves and to link struggles. Workplace struggles are not different from community. They're different from community struggles, but they are linked to community struggles. So in how we organize, we also, just as much as we're making references to the Freedom Charter, we also need to take a leaf from how people organized in the 70s, this social movement, unionism, that struggles of communities were directly linked to struggles of people on the workplace or in the shop floor. That those kind of organizing strategies is things we need to be taking and thinking about seriously. And this is not to say the way we're organizing now is wrong, but it's to say we need to take it further. We need to link our communities with workplaces around us, but we also need to link to other struggles in the continent. That some of these mines, Anglo, for instance, is not just operating in South Africa. You go to Ghana, that you go to South America, you go to parts of the Pacific, that these companies are in different parts of the world. So in our organizing, it's not just a matter of linking the workplace and communities, but it's also linking South Africa to the broader global South and making these demands and these pushes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asanda. Sabelo.
Thanks to the panelists. I have two questions from Facebook, from our viewers on Facebook. From Pumlani Ngomezulu, who is based in Emelo. They are going to Comrade Rone. Question number 1, looking at People's Mining Charter Section 10, that says regulate and legalize artisanal miners. So what's your take on artisanal miners considering the unemployment crisis and the resuscitation of our economy, South African economy? That's question number 1. Question number 2, how can we enforce the Constitution to align with Freedom Charter and People's Mining Charter to reflect in the communities, not somewhere in America? Those are the 2 questions that goes to Comrade Ronnie from our Facebook viewers.
Comrade Chair, Comrade Gilbert, if I can just have one more. Here's one more from Naka
Yes,
to Comrade Ronnie.
Okay.
I'll read it quickly. It says, to veteran Ronnie, we'd like to thank you for a brief explanation on our Freedom Charter and also thank those who drafted and adopted it. We can not throw our baby out with the bath water. What we have to do is take power and do things on our own, because those who are in power do not understand what is radical transformation. Our country is being given to the multinational companies and the political elite. We need your input and advice to all mining affected communities, because we are the most marginalized communities in South Africa. The Freedom Charter identified a failure to implement, especially on second principle, where the people shall share in the country's wealth. Communities need urgent attention on a call to close all those mines, and we are not safe under our own Freedom Charter. So if Comrade Ronnie would like to respond to that. And then later on, there is some interesting questions in the chat. Comrade Gilbert, are you seeing them?
In the chats?
Yes.
Yes, I can see them, yeah.
Yeah, there's one there interesting. So after Comrade Ronnie's answered, maybe you can just look at the one from Janet. Dr. Janet
Okay,
has got a very good question there, and then there are some others as well later on. Thank you.
Siyabonga. Comrade Gilbert, just help me a moment with the first question from Comrade Ngomezulu. I didn't quite get the very first. He asked the 2 questions, and the first one, did that relate to the informal miners, the so-called Zama?
Comrade Sabela, can you repeat the question?
Yes, Comrade Ronnie, it relates to Zamazamas. What's your take on Zamazamas considering the unemployment rate crisis and the resuscitation of our economy? So basically, I think what is asking, what do you think about formalizing artisanal small-scale miners to create employment and to assist uplifting the economy?
I'm all for it, unreservedly. I'm sure that the other comrades on the panel, they clearly know far more about the mining sector than I do. But of course, they must be included, they must be legalized. The reason that they endanger themselves to such a degree is because of the poverty, because of the exclusion. So the women today have spoken about marginalization, etc., and the marginalization of human beings with hands to labor, with brains to think, who create the wealth of our society when we have such privation, such unemployment. How can we allow a situation where we keep anybody out of the productive process of creating wealth? We need to look at government, needs to look, but never just leave things to government. We elect the government. We don't just sit back and vote after 4 or 5 years for a government. They love doing that in Britain and France and Germany and the United States, even though people like us at the grassroots, they get involved all the time. But in the main, the domination of a bourgeois society is to say, leave it to us, the elite, the owners, the wealth creators. Their wealth creation depends on exploitation of labor. So we have these aspects in this country. I'm moving from that initial question into the further one, which links up with the second one. And in all of this, the question really focuses on a freedom charter, which I said in my summing up, which is about aspirations from the 50s, from the Rocky Mafeking generation, the Mandelas, the Zulus, etc. And we come to the situation today where we've moved on, where we've come into a situation where, unfortunately, the owners of the means of production, as I've said, continue to reap the rewards, the exploitation, the plunder, the way they absolutely defile the environment and so on, and the living conditions. I must say that, and I've said so in an interview, that on the Marikana issue and the fact of the absolute massacre there was so appalling and showed where we were post 1994 and what kind of society where the mine owners can use the police against striking workers. And in relation to this, I had commented on one occasion when I was asked about nationalization, and I had said that the question is fundamental. The Freedom Charter leaves that in a rather vague way for the reasons that I've mentioned earlier. But if we look at what's happening in the mining community, and those on the panel have detailed this, and the pain and the agony and the marginalization, I said when I was interviewed, I was shocked that at Marikana, at all these mining communities and others, but talking about the mining communities, that there we had in government as a president, a former leader of the Mine Workers Union, that we had the present minister, Mantashe, who had been one of the leaders of the mine workers and our president today. And yet, and I turned to myself, I was responsible for water and forest and before that, defense, etc. I said how appalling I felt after Marikana, and we suddenly saw how the mine bosses were doing nothing about the housing, the amenities, the provision of water, sanitation, and yet we had 3 leading unionists from the miners who were in key positions, and Ronnie Casserol's who served in a government. And we had done nothing about those awful situations. And that's why the only way ahead, I'm saying this to the comrades who then went on to ask me about the way ahead, whether you like an ANC government or not, and I was in that government and I've been in the ANC all my adult life, whoever is voted in, we must use the power of the mass base, the power led by the working class and the women with the men, to change society, to make the demands, to point to the shortcomings of implementation, the shortcomings in the light of aspirations of the leaders of yesteryear, such as Freedom Charter drafters, etc. It's us here, it's our struggle. And we can't simply sit back or talk amongst ourselves. We've had a comrade who said the only way is to mobilize and organize. And that kind of organization from the past, be it the 70s, be it the 50s and the Defiance campaigns that led to that Freedom Charter for that time. We have to mobilize our people if we want to achieve a socialist future for this country, and a government, whatever that government is, even if it's one we vote in and claims to be socialist, from the grassroots. We've seen what happened to socialism in communist countries, from the Soviet Union and elsewhere. Unless the people are totally involved in a socialist democracy, I'm not talking about Western social democracy, but a real inclusive democracy in which we govern from the grassroots right through to the top, we'll never achieve the end of the degradation of society and the inequalities, the enormous inequalities that are faced by the poor, the laborers, the workers, the marginalized, the women, the youth, and so on. And that's the way I want to join here today to say it's 65 years since your forebears I regard them as mine because they infuse me with my identity and my whole destiny. That those forebears of the country, they speak to us and they say, as we mobilized against the apartheid system, today we must mobilize for a system that is a just system, that creates real equality, that ensures, in the words of Elizabeth Mofokeng and her generation, that the wealth goes to the people. And it can only go to the people when the means of production are controlled and owned by the people, not by a minority of parasites on society.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'm having a question now from Dr. Janet Nakamwe. So the question is directed to our three feminist panelists. The question reads like, taking into account the lacuna and shortfalls of the mining charter in relation to persistent marginalization and exclusion of women, how then should a gender-inclusive mining charter look like in contemporary South Africa? So the question is directed to three of our women panelists, Asanda, Tukelo, and Millicent. Anyone to answer the question? See, Asanda is taking it on. Press the button.
No. I'm not taking it on yet. I think I'll let the other comrades respond first.
Okay. Tukelo and Millicent. The question is, how then should a gender-inclusive mining charter look like in contemporary South Africa? Millicent? Tukelo?
Yes, Gilbert. Yes, I'm
Yes.
here.
Yeah, the question, you had the question, right?
Please say the question again.
So the question is from Dr. Janet Mnakangwe.
Yes.
An elementary question directed to the three of you as the feminist panelists. So it says, taking into account the lacuna and shortfalls of the mining charter in relation to persistent marginalization and inclusion of women, how then should a inclusive mining charter look like in the contemporary South Africa?
Okay, for me, because I believe that we all have equal ownership and rights over our minerals. So the mining charter should include women and should stop giving women 5%. I think it should be equal, like whenever they employ men, that they must employ women equals to men. Because I believe that if you can teach me a skill, I can also do the same skill. So there must be a very serious in mind. Because give me a skill, then I'll show you that I can do it. That's what I believe.
Comrade Tukela, any input from your side?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, for my side, I think the mining charter must recognize us as women that are affected by mines, and give us the equal, like the way men have in the mine industry. Because when we check, we as a woman, if we apply a job, a woman must sleep with the supervisors or the managers, and which is wrong. And if the women have access to a work or employed, they treat women somehow. They don't give us the equal job like men. So we want the mining charter to treat us equally, fairly. If we apply job, let them employ us fairly, like a man. Thanks.
Thank you, Comrade.
Can I add?
Yes, Asanda.
It's Millicent.
Okay, Millicent. Okay.
Okay. What I also like to raise is that I'm not going to say men are weak, but I believe we do most of the work, because at the end of the day, I do most unpaid labors. At home, you'll find out the house is clean, I've cooked for you, I've washed your clothes. So what more can I not do? Because already I'm doing more labor. So I think that can also be included, that we do more unpaid labor. So why not treat us as equals? I believe we are equal already.
Thank you, Millicent. Asanda, you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Comrade Janet, for the question. I think I appreciate the question, and it's actually not elementary at all. It's very central to, I think, what we're discussing today. But I think for me, it's not just about a gender inclusive mining charter. It's about a mining charter, yes, that's gender inclusive, that is pro-working class, pro-poor, pro-women, and so forth. So the question is not just to tweak certain things in the mining charter so that it's gender inclusive. I think there needs to be an overhaul of the whole mining charter. The mining charter as it is, which is why there's a People's Mining Charter. I work closely with Benchmarks. Benchmarks has also submitted a lot of critiques to the current mining charter, or to the current iteration of the mining charter, because it is not pro-poor also. So there's a lot of things in the mining charter that need to be challenged. And the only way we can do that is to take it back to the people. Just like when we were talking about the history of the Freedom Charter, it rose from the ground up. The mining charter in this country cannot be drafted by Gwede Mantashe and the mining companies or the Minerals Council. People need to be at the center of it. People need to draft it, and other things need to come secondary to the people. So the bigger question is, how do we make this a people's charter? I apologize about that. And I think it needs to be taken back to the people, to be drafted by the people. And the people need to make sure that they center struggles that are around women. This 10% thing, when it is drafted by the people, I believe that it will fall off automatically, because the people will know that 10% women in mining is not going to address their issues. But there's a lot of other things that even if it had to be 90% women in mining, it would still not address. So I don't want us to think of it as just tweaking certain parts in the mining charter so that it is gender inclusive, but to completely change the mining charter so that it is pro-working class, pro-poor, pro-women, and a pro-worker also. So take back to the people, remove all of these inhibitions that they make us believe are actually enabling. These are inhibitions that are meant to pacify us, these 10% things, but they are put there in the name of being open. They're put there in the name of progressive gender politics, and they do the opposite. And the reason I'm suggesting that is, as I've already said, that nothing in the mining charter as it is pro-us, and us includes women. But also in the mining charter, I mean, there's so much that when you use a gender lens to unpack what's going on there, you'll see that this thing is really so against people, this charter. It perpetuates our exclusion in so many of its clauses or sections. And what I mean by that is, I mean, small things like how how safety is imagined. And you see that masculinity is the vein of what is currently there. And if we want, again, for it to be inclusive, when now it is part of the People's Charter, or when it has been redrafted so that it addresses some of the things that the People's Charter speaks to, that there's other things like the language, the people that we imagine when we think mining, that needs to shift first, so that whatever recrafting we do, it is truly inclusive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asanda. I think I have two more questions that's directed to all the panelists. The first one is from Redu Hilleman. She is asking, Marikana or Rustenburg, have subsequent democratic elections been used to change the local development through IDPs in Marikana or Rustenburg? So the second question is from, can I repeat the question, please? So, have the subsequent democratic election been used to change the local development through the IDPs in Marikana and Rustenburg? The second question is from Dr. Janet again. The unprecedented COVID-19 health pandemic has added extra burden on everyday challenges among mining affected communities, particularly women's unpaid care work. For example, a significant number of mine workers tested positive to COVID-19 since the call to open up mining sector at level 4. What we know is that women will bear the burden unpaid care work. If we were to rethink the mining charter, what are some of the key issues that should be considered from the learning of the current crisis? So basically the question here is, what are some of the key issues that should be considered from the learning of the crisis that resulted from the reopening of mines amidst COVID-19? Did the panelists hear the question?
Yes.
So this one is directed to all panelists. And even the first one from Rudy, which talks about the development through IDPs. So I'll give it to you, panelists.
Thank you, Comrade. I don't think I'll do justice in responding to it, partly because I've got to excuse myself. I have a departmental meeting that's starting shortly.
Okay.
But I think, I mean, part of the response to Comrade Janet's question is actually pointing us back to the People's Charter. I think the People's Charter outlines very concrete things that in the current mining charter and in the latest iterations of the mining charter, things that, I mean, in the current one, the mining charter, communities, they are there, but you see that they are being further marginalized. The clause on women, in my view, it's like there's been a real rollback. So there's like concrete things that can be done, but I think we need to use the current People's Charter to sort of push back. And I think in the current People's Charter, if Comrade Jeanette is very familiar with it, she'll see it's very specific on certain things, but it's specific on the principles that we need to adopt. And I think if these principles are adopted in terms of, they'll help us in terms of addressing specificities, in terms of how do we engage with mining communities, but also not just mining communities, but labor sending mining communities and so forth, and women. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I've got to go. I have a departmental meeting that started 3 minutes ago. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asanda. Let me take this opportunity on behalf of Makua Amua Sub-Media Committee team. And we are blessed to have you as one of our panelists. I'm definitely sure that our feminist panelists have learned a lot from you, and they will continue learning a lot from you. Thank you again. I'm having one more question from Sello Muchusa that is directed to Comrade Ronnie. It reads like, considering the fact that organizations as progressive as they are play a vital role in our society, the most disturbing part is that these organizations end up resorting to courts of law, seeking remedies or legal interpretation, holding the government accountable. Why is the ANC-led government always using the neoliberal model to curtail and clamp the wings of these organizations, including labor unions? Why is it that as these organizations raise their voices beyond political party lines, they are being named? Oh, so what did you do now? Hello, Comrade Chris.
Yes, Comrade Gilbert.
See, my screen has went blank now. What's happened?
Screen went blank. No, maybe
Yeah.
just your connection.
Okay, I'm back now.
Okay. Are you back, Comrade Gilbert? Okay. While we're waiting for Comrade Gilbert, Comrade Millicent, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear, Chris.
Okay, great. So while we're waiting for Comrade Gilbert, come back online. There's a question from Mpo in Kutsong. And Mpo says, thank you, all our speakers. for fruitful presentations. It is said that the mineral wealth of the soil shall be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole, but the same wealth is transferred to the individual selfish capitalist. For a starter, mining communities are the poorest ones in the world, like there's no development at all. Before benefiting from this wealth as women, we must have sex in exchange. When will women be in high positions rather than being cleaners and receptionists? So that's, I suppose, is a generic question. And then we have Comrade Temba, who's had his hand up for quite some time. Comrade Temba, can I ask you to unmute yourself? And then you would have an opportunity to speak. Temba?
Okay, I'm here. Am I right?
Go ahead, sir.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please, Comrade
Hello?
Temba. Yes,
Okay.
please, go ahead.
Yeah, Comrade Chris, my question is actually directed directly to the rehabilitation and the environment and of the ecology and the further life after mining. That it is still perpetuated that the mines are still living on the old SLPs, which were actual SLPs. But now the fact remains is that no one wants to take responsibility of the further damage to our ecology and the further damage to the grass and the poisoning of our water as well. Because around these mining dams, these were all settlement areas of ex-mine workers are living. And especially now that also townships are built around all these mines. All the living settlement areas are all surrounded by mining. And it means that if now there's a change of weather patterns, there's further damage to health of the people, because when you look at the question of compensation to the ex-mine workers on the part of silicosis, which is non-affected disease carriers, there's no hospitalization, there's no medication, and people even today have not yet had compensation for that. And that money has been out already, supposed to go to the people that deserve it, but it is put in some trust. And then people are dying. And at the same time, the families of these people are still expecting a payment from these people. What is the follow-up that this can be done by the Comrades Ronnie? I can go further than that, but I think I'll stop today, because the fact remains is on the health and the follow-up of ex-mine workers. But at the same time, you know what damage the people are also getting, because of people are now living in these conditions. People who don't even have worked on the mining industry are suffering from chest pains, lung diseases, and so on. And the health status is getting worse in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Temba. I'm going to ask Comrade Safiso to go ahead, and then Comrade Selo after that. So please keep your inputs very brief and to the point, please. Thank you.
I hope I'm audible enough. However, I just wanted to touch on a few points. First of all, the People's Mining Charter is a result of rigorous consultation process that went out throughout the country. And it comes from the Kampala Declaration, where civil society got together and said, here's the proposed piece of legislation. How do we ensure that it encompasses what we are fighting for? And that was the Kampala Declaration that led to the People's Mining Charter process consultation, and then the adoption of the People's Mining Charter. That was 4 years ago, and 2 years ago, Makua Wamua was very instrumental in the formulation of what is known as the Kampala Declaration. We were in Uganda in 2018 on this day, fortunately, when we formulated the Kampala Declaration that calls for are the same principles for an African People's Mining Charter throughout other countries like Malawi, Liberia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and the likes. So my input on this is that public consultation is a cornerstone of any democratic society. However, both the Freedom Charter's first principles, the principle number 1 of the Freedom Charter says that the people shall govern. And principle number 1 of the People's Mining Charter says that community consultation and inclusion in decision-making processes. However, we have seen that, like Comrade Chris has asserted it through his different writings, that it's so sad that communities have to go to court to assert their democratic right of being consulted. Now I know we have all directed our questions to Comrade Ronnie. However, it would be an insight for me to hear from him as a person who has sat on the NEC, for a person who has led the Ministry of Intelligence, to know whether is it an ANC culture not to consult communities, because the ANC-led government was part of the formulation of the Freedom Charter to say that the people shall govern. We are seeing that in Kolobeni. People want to govern. People are clear what is it that they want. However, that is not done. We are seeing in some Kele, people do not want to relocate, but it's government that keeps enforcing and giving powers to mining companies to say that, no, go ahead and forget about the rights of people. So just a question to Comrade Tony. Why is it so hard for the ANC-led government to stick to what they believed should be the cornerstone of the democratic dispensation that they so hardly fought for, and today they are going against what they fought for? Thank you.
Thank you, Sifiso. Comrade Selo, can I ask you to very briefly outline your points?
Thank you very much. Am I audible that side?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let me acknowledge having all the panelists here, including Comrade Ronnie. It's a privilege having to engage with people who served in the ANC, NEC, and also in the ANC-led government as members of the cabinet. I posed a question, but it was not very clear. It was actually considering the work that is being done by the civil society organization, considering the fact that these organizations play a critical role in the societies. The most disturbing part is the fact that these organizations end up resorting to the courts of law to seek remedies or legal interpretations, trying to hold the government accountable. Why is the ANC-led government always using the neoliberal tactics, trying to clean the wings of this organization, including the labor movement? And then the other question is why are these organizations always, when they raise their voice beyond political party lines, they are being named counter-revolutionaries? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being brief, Comrade Selo. I appreciate it. So, comrades, we have been busy for 2 hours. I'm going to ask Comrade Ronnie to wrap up the conversation for us. And then, unless there's something very, very urgent, we are going to wrap up this conversation for today. So, Comrade Ronnie, there was quite a few questions for you. Hopefully you can deal with some of them. But if not, if you could maybe just bring it all together and send us on our merry way as we continue our struggles.
Thanks so much. How much time do we have left, Comrade?
We have as much time as everybody wants to stay here, so we don't really have a time limit. I'm just mindful of your time.
No, I just see I'm not going to take like too long. I just thought maybe there was like 60 seconds left. You know how on television they say you've got 60 seconds. So to do what has been asked and to do justice to it, of course, in a short time one can't do justice, but I'll try to at least be brief and just a few minutes. Before I come to the last two questions, which was specifically to me, and they're very important questions from Comrade Piso and Comrade Stella, and they do link in with a lot of what we've been discussing today from the very beginning 2 hours ago. But I just want to at least make some reference to the marginalization of women in mining and in society generally. It keeps coming up, and it's correct that this is raised. I have spoken in response a bit earlier on, so I just want to say that the men who have some advantages in their physical makeup, in which gives them some form of muscle power to raise heavier loads than our female compatriots, we better be really mindful of the fact that with modern technologies advance, so the use by humanity in terms of production on sheer muscle power is waning. And more we're using modern technological means. I'm not talking about bringing robots in to replace human beings, but in terms of the basic new forms of modern technology, the question of male advantage in terms of muscle power is absolutely waning, and the employers need to be made totally conscious of this fact of not hiring less women than men, of not paying women less than they pay men, that there's the need for equality in all senses, be it in what is in the past and up to now even been regarded as the masculine preserve, such as mining and so on, that it is time when we have to ensure that women, who, as we know, are half the population, and in a lot of cases just over 50% anyway, are not there as chattels in the kitchens and the bedrooms, and this question of sexual favors in return for jobs, etc. And we can see this happening worldwide, that men are being put to shame, especially amongst those dreadful employers who are named and shamed, and etc. So the world does change, and we must ensure it through our democratic approach and mobilization and organization, which has been part and parcel of the discussions here today. I want to conclude by referring to the questions posed by the comrades Safisa and Sella, which focus very much on my experience in government and what takes place when people who have sworn to serve the people get into office. And it's not just in South Africa, we see it all over the world, and we've seen it in socialist countries too, rather serve their own selfish personal or family interests. We see this in the worst case with the Zuma period. But what Zuma succumbed to, and the comrades who were part and parcel of that, is what we have to face up to, that there is this particular tendency amongst human beings who get power to wield it in their own interests. There is a saying that power corrupts and all power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I know that comrades from Latin America don't go along with that, and I prefer what they say. And they say that power reflects the person's character. So when you see someone who seems to have been a person of the people, I don't want to say the man of the people, and who comes into office, the flaws in the character which incline that person to corruption are the things that show an arrogance, etc., We can never be sure what lies between any other human being's breast, mind, heart. And I'm not saying that there are not people who we work with and we can see patently through the way that they contribute, their democratic approach, the inclusiveness, the treatment of women and others, the courage they show in struggle, that these are not people to trust. They are, and these are people we elect to power. But we have to have something other than just putting faith in the human being, be they a Fidel Castro, a Lenin, a Churchill, a Gandhi, a Nelson Mandela. A lot of these people stick to their principles and a lot do not. How do we have the check and balance on that? It's only through a real democracy. It's only through enforcing the collective power at the grassroots, be it in mining, be it in industry, be it in shipbuilding, be it in any form of factory or other production, that we have to have the collective strength and voice of the people, and in the first place of those who produce wealth. And if you read Marx and you read Engels and you read Lenin, when they talk about socialism, this is what they emphasize all the time. And we did see this going wrong even when the workers, in a sense, came to power, or where workers, as in our country, voted in what was meant to be and must still be made a people's government, respecting the people's will and working for the people's will. And that needs, quite frankly, a socialist alternative. So the contradictions that we are having in our country, in our society at all levels, including marginalization of the women, the poor, the unemployed, the youth, and so on, is precisely because we have not created that socialism that many of us have talked about even during the pre-years. And you know, if I go back to when I came into the movement, the end of the 50s and the 60s, most of the comrades within the liberation movement were absolutely socialist in their orientation. I worked in the camps with the 76 generation. I was a trainer there, a political educator, part of Mkhonto weSizwe. And when we discussed these issues, there was hardly one voice that spoke in favor of a bourgeois system. What happens when we come to power is that unless we ensure that we have democracy from below, unfortunately, people will incline towards serving other interests, their own, and we see in so many cases how they cave in to the seduction, comrades, of the mine owners, the land owners, the factory owners, which is why the only answer can be workers' power at all levels of society, which is what socialism and communism is about. It doesn't mean because we failed so far that we can't achieve it. We move on, we learn from experience. And I want to end by saying that Safisa makes the point about consultation and how the ANC, the comrades, had always talked about consultation, public participation, public consultation as the cornerstone of democracy. I would say, Comrade Safisa, that's part of it. It's not enough. The other part of that consultation is the people's power, the workers' power from the grassroots, and ensuring that we break through now from 1994 in the broad brushstrokes of a freedom charter into details today in which there's no question of fudging, as the charter did in those days, talking about the people shall govern, the people shall share in the wealth, the people shall share in the land. That is a little bit still fudged. We now have to move on. And those of us who can see that the only answer is the socialist answer, we must organize as never before. We must mobilize. It must be very broad-based along the lines of the working class, the revolutionary intellectuals, drawing the allies into that particular context, into that force, but it must be led by the working class and the women within that working class must be as equal as any of the men folk. Thank you very much indeed, comrades. I've enjoyed being with you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Ronnie. We are so blessed to have you with us and for you imparting your wisdom, your experience, and your insights. But I'm not going to be forward. I see Comrade Gilbert is with us. I'm going to hand back to Comrade Gilbert. Comrade Gilbert, all yours.
Thanks, Comrade Chris. Apologies, leaders. I have some network challenges, but I think it is better now. So, Comrade Chris, we are almost on a 2-hour mark now. I think we are over 2-hour mark with our session. So I don't know, do we still have other questions from the attendees, or the panelists want to add up to their presentation or so?
Comrade Chris, if I could quickly come in. I've
Panelist
just really, yeah.
Okay, Comrade Ronnie.
No, I just wanted to say, because you've been absent, I've had my say and I've more or less completed my summing up. Unfortunately, I have to move on to something else. So I've just got a few minutes left, which I'll sit in on to hear you and the comrades winding up. I just wanted to thank you very much, Comrade Chair, and the fellow panelists for having me along. I'm truly honored to have been with you all. And the future is socialism, as Chris Hani said, Comrade Chair. The future is socialism, but we have to organize and fight for it.
Okay, so Comrade Tukel and Comrade Millicent, can I have your closing remarks, please? Let me start with Comrade Millicent.
Okay, thanks, Comrade Gilbert. I'd like to thank the platform, and I'd like to also thank Dr. Asanda, right?
Yes.
For saying that we should take the charter back to the people, and especially women, so that it can be proper articulated. So yeah, forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tukelo.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to Ronnie and Asanda. I would like to say to women that let's stand together, let's be united. Forward we go. The more you unite ourselves, the more we win our battle. Thanks.
Thanks, Comrade Tukelo. Comrade Francina, I would like to give this opportunity to you on behalf of our national coordinator to give us the closing remarks. Francina.
I'm here. Thank you very much to all the panelists for having a robust engagement. And thank you, Makua Wamua, for organizing this platform for us as communities to know more and also engage. Let's take our People Mining Charter forward and educate the communities about their rights, the right to life, the right to be inclusive, and to the right of consent. Amandla to that, and nothing about us without us. Thank you.
So, Comrade Chris, do you have any closing remarks to share?
Thank you, Comrade Gilbert. No, I don't think, I think we have covered it very well. I think you've done very well. We are so proud of all our panelists, and we're grateful for everybody who shared their time. And all that I can reiterate is that our struggle is about building power from below. What Makua does on a day-to-day basis, so we are building our branches across the country with the idea that those branches must be engaging in struggles at the local level, because what happens at the local level is not separate from what happens at the national level. So when we engage with Gwede Mantashe at national, it is about the struggle at the local. And so we have to have strong branches in order to build up this organic movement of people who can bring about change, because ultimately that is the only way that change will happen. And I think Comrade Ronnie spoke to it very well when he said that one of the mistakes one can say we made post 1994 is we left people's power at the door. Prior to 1994, in the 1980s, just after the 1976 uprising, and in the 1980s, we were building a momentum towards an idea of people's power. But in the excitement of the capitulation by the apartheid state, we left people's power at the door. The People's Mining Charter is about reawakening the idea of people's power. And so I think for Makua and Wamua and Yamua, it is important that we build strong movement at the base so that we can reignite the idea of people's power. And it is only then that true liberation will be achieved, when individuals can act on their own agency, when communities can act on their own agency. So we say nothing about us without us. Amandla ngawetu, power to the people. Thank you, comrade.
Okay, everyone, let me, on behalf of Makua, Wamua, and the Advisory Office Media Subcommittee team, extend our very hearty vote of thanks to all our honorable panelists for blessing us with their time. Thank you, Ronnie, and thanks everyone, our attendees and our Facebook viewers. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank